welcome to the Hero Report podcast. My name is Ari Cohen. I'm a professor of political science at the University of Nebraska, and with me, as always, my good friend from sunny Michigan, Matt Langdon of the Hero Construction Company. Matt, how's it going?
It's going well. It's nice and sunny here, as usual.
I'm glad. It's very hot here. We're having a hot end of September, which I have to say I'm not crazy about. I prefer my fall to be like fall, but maybe we'll get there. Maybe we'll get there later.
Indeed, indeed.
Well, Matt, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, if spring is anything to go by in Michigan, there'll be 2 days of fall before we hit winter again.
Sure, that's always good. So Matt, we're here to talk about something a little bit different from our normal discussion. Normally we talk about heroic things, heroic people, heroic dogs, heroic blog posts, people who might or might not be heroes. Today, something quite different. We decided we would get together and talk about the television show Breaking Bad. I have been a fan really since almost the beginning. I watched the first season on DVD, and then I after that was all caught up. But I'd been reflecting about Breaking Bad on my blog after I guess it was this week, after the penultimate episode. The series is set to end this weekend, and I thought, and you thought, it would be a good idea to have a conversation about Breaking Bad, not because either of us believe that there's someone who's conventionally heroic, but because maybe by looking at people's reactions to Breaking Bad, we can learn something about how we feel about heroes on the screen and generally story arcs and making good choices and all that sort of thing. I guess we should say at the beginning, obviously I'm watching this show in real time. You are not. And so for all of our regular viewers and listeners, if you don't know anything about Breaking Bad, this might be of only limited interest to you. If you are not caught up on Breaking Bad, we're going to do our best not to spoil Breaking Bad. At the very least, we're going to do our best to talk in broad brushstrokes because I'm trying not to spoil the show for you because I'm 7 episodes ahead of you.
I would say let's keep our efforts to not spoil the show just to the second half of this season. I think if anyone's watching and is worried about getting spoiled for any other episodes, maybe I don't think we need to worry too much about that.
Okay.
That's some time ago.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's fine. So we may talk about things that happened in the first the first few seasons. And so if you've never seen Breaking Bad, keep that in mind. We may talk about things that have happened. And we will, in addition, I'm going to ask you to speculate on the conclusion. Especially, I think it'll be interesting because as I say, I'm 7 episodes ahead, and so my speculations and your speculations may be quite different. But obviously, we'll be publishing this before the show actually concludes. So it'll be, I think, of interest to people in that way. And of course, then we can talk about how terribly wrong we were once we've actually both finished the show. Okay, so how to begin, Matt? I mean, I think that the way that I want to start is to talk a little bit about that blog post that I think you read and that maybe you thought we should talk a little bit about Breaking Bad as a result of. What I suggested in my blog post, I think quite strongly, is, and I'll just sort of briefly recap, it was a short post, I never knew what Vince Gilligan's moral universe looked like, right? I didn't know what point he was trying to make or if he had a point to make. And now I feel like I have a sense of what he wants to do and maybe how he wants his audience to react. And that's only as a result of seeing the second half of the final season. Through the beginning, the first 8 episodes of the final season, I still wasn't sure where this was going. Now I think it's relatively clear. with one episode to go. And what I said in the blog post is that it's very hard to watch Breaking Bad now. In some sense, I feel like viewers are being punished. Each episode seems like it's taking a psychic toll on me. It's gripping. It's gripping television. It's the most unusual show I've ever seen. And in terms of my reaction, there's no other show that's comparable. I'm jumping out of my seat. I'm anxious. My palms are sweating. It's very uncomfortable. There was only really a couple of times in other seasons when I felt that way. Well, I guess we're spoiling things, right? So one of the first Todd episodes in season, I guess it's season 5, with the train robbery. I was standing up throughout the train robbery. And I didn't even think that I was doing it. I just found myself standing up during the train robbery. And now I'm being punished for that, right? Because against my better judgment, I wanted Jesse and Walt and Todd to succeed. And I'm not supposed to want them to succeed because what they're doing is terrible. And we get that, right? I mean, intuitively we know that, but people still want Walt to succeed in what he's doing, and now we're paying a price for that. And I think what I want to suggest is that sort of the arc of this universe bends toward justice, right? If you root for the meth cook, now we see what you're rooting for, right? Now we really see the consequences of cheering for someone like this.
I'm confused. I think not confused. I think I know why people are cheering for Walt, but I think the reality of what's been presented in the show doesn't support that. I've been rewatching the series with my wife, who has not seen it before, so I'm currently halfway through the 4th season. And from day one, he's a very unlikable person. And I'm glad you brought that up early on, because I think that's the biggest piece of this Breaking Bad puzzle. Is this guy he's unredeemable. There's nothing good about the guy throughout the show. He does horrible thing after horrible thing. He's got no patience for people. No, he's a bad person through actions, through I think through character as well. But I think that it has been this idea that he's this just average guy, and we're supposed to be watching this arc of him falling and becoming the villain, the hero becoming the villain. I think is a nice tagline or a nice selling point, but it's just never been the case. He's never been on the side of good. He's never been trying to do anything good. There's the attitude or the idea that he was doing it for his family, which I increasingly question the legitimacy of. I mean, it's all about himself. I mean, right from the start. As soon as he gets that taste of success, it's about Walt at the expense of everyone else, and you can see that time and time again. So I think right from the start, it's been clear that he's been on the bad side. It's the other characters that I think are interesting in the terms of a discussion on heroism, or some of the other characters. But that's been striking me as I'm rewatching the show. I definitely felt that pull towards Walt the first time through. That it was, But I think on closer inspection, maybe everyone's been taken for a ride here in in the sense that people did get behind him, and if you watch it, I think if you watch it again and you watch it carefully, or you're paying attention to what he's actually doing, this might turn out to be a big trick on everybody to say, "Huh, I tricked you into thinking this guy was a good guy," when, I mean, he never has been.
Right. No, I think that you're right. I don't think Walt has ever been the hero, right? I think he's clear. The show is about him, right? He's the protagonist. But if there's someone who's a conventional hero, it's his brother-in-law, Hank, right? I mean, Hank is the diligent officer of the law. I mean, if this is a Western, right, which in some sense it's really become, if we're watching a Western, I mean, there's the marshal and there's the outlaw. The question has always been, the pitch, right? Supposedly Vince Gilligan's pitch to the networks, was about turning Mr. Chips into Scarface, right? But what I think we've learned is that he was never really Mr. Chips. He was this guy who was kind of a small-time narcissist. For whom, but who had kind of this persecution complex, right? Things went wrong for him when he got bound. We didn't know this, right, until later on when we learned the backstory about this company, right? The Gray Matter company that he helped to found and then was bounced out of, and he never got his due, right? His co-founders got not just the money but the accolades, and he went and taught high school chemistry. And so I mean, in that way, he was a small-time narcissist who never got his due, who was victimized. And then what we've actually seen is him go from a small-time narcissist to a big-time narcissist. I mean, my sense is that he's never been a candidate for the role of hero, but people found him to be cool, right? They found the things that he did, the things that he said, to be cool. They liked the hat and the color palette for Walt. They liked the Heisenberg name. They liked the crystal blue persuasion montage scene. I think it was the end of season 4. And they loved. I mean, you watched it on Twitter and on Facebook. People loved the that line, "I am the one who knocks," right? About standing on the other side of the door and being I am the danger, right? People love that, but it's not. I mean, no one. I think that was sort of how Walt wanted to see himself too, right? This was the image he wanted to project, and a lot of the things that Walt did, at least early on, were like kind of these. They were in a bad situation, and he found a way to get out, right? An ingenious and sometimes devastating way to get out, or he sinned by way of omission rather than commission. It's not until much later that Walt starts to do things that I think are the conventionally bad things that we are horrified by, apart of course from cooking the meth, right? Which there's so little discussion of, right? Like for a show about cooking meth, there's so little discussion of the consequences of putting out 96% pure crystal meth.
Well, it's none, right? The ethical nature of that never comes up. It's if there's any complaint about it, it's that it's criminal. There's nothing more than that.
You never see like kids outside the school ground or dealers on. I mean, the only scenes really are Badger and Skinny Pete, Jesse's friends, and those are largely played for comedy, right? In a show that uses comedy really well. Those are often comedic scenes. Yeah, I mean, the real consequences of drug use we occasionally see with Jesse. But beyond that, it's very, very minimal, right? The consequences you get come in very, very different packages.
Yeah, I mean, but it's not even. I guess I'm thinking more of a conversation between Walt and Skylar. You would think that at some point, Skylar, with all the things that she complains about, would complain about the ethical ramifications of being a drug producer, but that's never an issue. I think ultimately the reason people are in love with it is that it's a fantasy for people in the rat race. Wow, I'm a teacher, and it can be a tough job or something, and I'd like to go out and start shooting people and making mad cash, and
right.
I mean, that's what it is. People feel like he's doing such a great job of getting out of being under the thumb of his crappy boss at the car wash, and his unthankless job as a teacher. But it would be much easier to sympathize with him if he was a good teacher. Even he's not good at that, and so it's very, like you say, it's not so much a fall as it is an amplification of his personality.
Well, let me challenge you on whether or not he's a good teacher. One thing that we can say for sure is that he definitely taught Jesse Pinkman chemistry. Right? Say what you will.
Not in the classroom, though.
Not in the classroom. No, of course not. But in a lab, nonetheless, right? I mean, that is a chemistry lab, and he made use of a chemistry lab to teach life lessons and chemistry.
Right.
Jesse Pinkman did not know chemistry before he started cooking with Heisenberg.
And that's because he had him as a teacher in high school.
but he didn't care about his teaching in high school. He was just the frustrated small-time narcissist, right? He cared about his teaching in the big-time lab that Gustavo Fring builds for him, right? There he really cares about chemistry. And his exacting standards are passed on to Jesse. I'm interested, though, in what you said, right? That the other characters provide opportunities for heroism. I'd be curious to hear what you think about this, because we'll get back around to Walt toward the end, because I have more to say there. But I'm curious about these other heroes or potential heroes.
Well, yeah, I mean, I by no means do I think there's a lot of heroes in the show, but I think that there's conversations to have about heroism with the other characters, not with Walter. I mean, he is the one that's causing the bad stuff to happen. So it's the reactions of the others, and I think Jesse flirts with doing the right thing from time to time and gets sucked back in. I think ultimately he's there's an interesting roller coaster for him, I think. We can talk about Skylar a bit later as well, I think, but I mean, she does nothing virtually to stop him. There are numerous times where she's told that she should and is given offers of protection to do so, and just doesn't. And Hank as the sheriff. He's an interesting character there too, because he's certainly not just straight up and down good guy by any means, and I think he's been one of the favorite parts of the show, because he starts off as this caricature as this sort of the macho anti-Walter at the start, and evolves into someone who's has problems, but knows that there's something really bad about he's the only one in the show that ever kind of intimates that it's really bad to be a mass drug producer, and he goes after it, and he sacrifices things. He does the right thing despite bureaucratic hurdles. But he definitely goes offline as well. I mean, when he beats up Jesse, he beats him close to death. He's human, and I think that's what's interesting about him as a hero, is that he does sort of reflect normal life with opportunities of heroism. Not, we've talked about before that no real life hero is perfect, and I think that's a challenge in any story that's being told. But because this is such a long story, you do have those opportunities, I think. So,
right.
I mean, any of the other characters are pretty much caricatures anyway. They're serving a purpose rather than evolving.
Right. Yeah, I do think it's really interesting how many of the characters are really kind of set pieces rather than characters. And I haven't heard a lot of people talk about this, but Walt Jr. he's a set piece, right?
Might as well be a couch.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't have a lot of. He doesn't have a lot of business, to do. There's not a lot of evolution in the character of Walt Jr. Apart from deciding he would rather be called Flynn, and the same. I mean, Saul Goodman is clearly a beloved character, who's I guess going to get his own spin-off or prequel or whatever it's going to be, but I mean, Saul is he's amoral, right? There is no moral compass to Saul, and he simply exists to know guys and to clean up messes, right? Yeah. It's a device. It's a plot. Saul is a plot device. And then there's a bunch of sort of bad guys, right? The hurdles that Walt and Jesse have to overcome, from Crazy Eight to the Salamancas to Gus Fring himself, right? There are all these, these characters who come in and have to be dealt with. But again, they don't. There's no evolution to those characters either, right?
I guess Mike is the exception there.
What's that?
Mike is the exception.
Oh yeah, Mike. Mike Ehrmantraut is a good. I mean, I don't know if they'd always planned for him to have so much going on, with the granddaughter and all this business, but that was quite interesting. And I'm not sure what we learn about Mike. Right? Mike, I guess, better than anyone, recognizes Walter for what he is. Yep. Right? He's horrified by Walter in a way, weirdly, that he's not horrified by Gus Fring, which I can't quite figure out, right? Because
I think Gus is pretty straight and narrow. Like, Gus makes sense, and he knows that Walt has massive ambition that he needs to scale up quickly. I think Gus was big time and had some ambition, obviously, but he was pretty. He was easy to predict, I guess.
I guess so. I mean, is it easy to? I mean, he kills a guy with a box cutter. Like, is that? I don't know. That seemed unpredictable.
Yeah,
Until you learned his backstory, right? Which does Mike know his backstory from south of the border? Because I don't know. He seems like a character that I'd be horrified by, at least as much as Walter.
Yeah, true. So
he doesn't seem to have any qualms working for Gus. And then he quickly has lots of qualms about working with or for Walter, and I think that's interesting. I think that just shows an evolution in what they wanted to do with the character from one season to the next. And personally, if I'm guessing, I'm not in the I don't know anyone in the writers' room, but I would assume that they realized that Mike had a lot of potential, so they could do something more with him. But anyway, beyond those people, I don't see, the show is, in some sense, I mean, it's Walt and Jesse and Hank. I'm curious, opportunities for Jesse's heroism, since, let me stress again, you have not seen the final seven of the episodes that have aired this season. What would it take for Jesse to be a hero for you?
I think turning Walt in. I mean, I think that's something, and getting out of it. I think his relationship with Walt is very drug-like. He has similar a similar relationship with drugs as the show goes on. He keeps going back and away and back and away, and I think for me that's one option for his character arc, is to finally say that's it. We've got to this guy needs to stop what he's doing. He's out of control. So I'm going to turn him in. I mean, that's what would need to happen for me. Do I think that's going to happen? Probably not.
Okay, and you said he'd have to get away with it. He'd have to get away. So are we back to our
get away from Walt?
Oh, get away from Walt.
Punishment.
I see. Okay, good.
And I think that's the sacrifice part, or the risk part, that he would have to say, I know I've been involved the whole time, but this guy has to stop.
Yeah. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons why we haven't seen that, right, in the first 4.5 seasons or whatever. And part of it is this kind of Walt is like a drug, but what's behind that, of course, is the father-son dynamic that Walt and Jesse seem to have. And I mean, there's a really sort of interesting conversation about the father-son dynamic that's very kind of poignant between Walt and Jesse, and not really so poignant between Walt and his actual son. I mean, there's two sort of father-son relationships there, but what we get more than anything is the impact of the father-son relationship, between Walt and Jesse, rather than between Walt and Flynn.
See, I don't know that I saw much of a father-son relationship there. I don't see. I mean, there were occasions where Walt seemed to consider Jesse, but there were too many things that he did that were just. I mean, there's no coming back from.
Oh yeah, no, he's using Jesse. I mean, in every scenario. But I mean, there are all these interesting ways where, I mean, it seems clear to me anyway that Jesse wants Walt's approval at all times, right?
Sometimes, I think.
Well, okay, not in the times when they're punching each other in Jesse's house. But I mean, he wants to have a relationship with Walt. And he always refers to him as Mr. White. He's and Walt, on occasion, at his most manipulative, calls Jesse son. He's sort of passing along fatherly advice, or puts a hand on his shoulder, or whatever. He goes to check on him, when Jesse disappears into his drug den, and I mean, a lot of it is self-serving, sure, but nonetheless, I think they're playing on that kind of older male, younger male dynamic. To explain sort of why Jesse has this kind of addiction, I think, with Walt, why it's so hard for him to get away from him. I mean, he for the most part wants Walt to approve of him.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Talking about the male on male there, I think I've been interested to see the backlash against Skylar in recent weeks. She had the actress had an editorial in, I think, the New York Times or something, complaining about.
Yeah, Anna Gunn, that's right.
How people are so hateful of her character for no reason, and I think.
Well, and not just that, right? That people are act hatefully toward her. Right. As a result of hating her character.
Right. So, I mean, obviously that's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's crazy, yes.
That's right. That's the work of crazy people, which the internet's really good at finding. But for me, her character is utterly unlikable from episode 1. She just... And it's reinforced... Like, I started disliking her fairly early on the first time watching it. Second time through, she's just... It's amazing how nagging she is, how manipulative she is, how we've already talked about how sort of uncaring about the grand ethics of what's going on. Her intervention with Walter, and I don't know if it was the first season, where she sat him down and they had to have a family meeting and everybody got to tell Walter why he was an idiot for not wanting. I mean, she's the character is utterly unlikable. And I know, she's kind of switched gears in season 4, starting to be assertive and being part of it, and even that rang false. I mean, her insistence on the car wash just baffled. I mean, it's
she's got a head for business. She's made that car wash hum. I mean, that car
right.
wash is making money.
Right. It's just, what I think it is that it's a badly written character, and I think that's a problem in lots of TV and lots of movies because there just aren't many women writers. But she's just a badly written character, and so, unfortunately for the actress who's playing her, she's getting the backlash for that. But it's similar to what you said about Walter Jr. I mean, he's a nothing. There are some poor characters in the show, poorly written characters.
I think it's hard to know what to do with Skylar. I think in some ways they did a better job with her sister, with Marie.
Yep.
I think Marie is a more interesting character, and maybe that's because Marie isn't so connected to the tension, and maybe it's because Marie doesn't have the same kind of screen time. And I think also,
too.
Yeah, and I think it's also the case that at the beginning they really wanted Walt to be beat down by all of the things in his life. I mean, I think they wanted his wife to be overbearing. And I think they wanted to then get away from that later, right? I think they wanted to do more with her and to make her more complex. I think that the scenes, the several episodes where she kind of had a breakdown, I can't remember if it's season 4 or season 5, where she ends up sort of in the pool. I thought those were very good. I thought that those were certainly the most clearly complex attempts to look at what it would mean to be living in the situation that she's living in, because it's at that point that she's living in a really sort of an untenable world, right? I mean, she's not a part of it. She doesn't want to be a part of it, but in some sense she's trapped, right? It's really a quite abusive relationship, I mean, and I think that the way that they engaged that was pretty good. The thing that I've been amazed by is the reaction against the Skylar character has been, in some sense, anger at the way that she holds Walt back from his greatness.
Right.
Which again gets me back to my original position about how we're being punished, for thinking that this is something great that Walt is doing, right? If she is holding him back, what the expectation is, we should be celebrating that, right? Because in fact, he needs to be held back because he's a monster. But people are accusing her of not that's a very strange complaint, and it's not that the complaint has not been from what I've heard that she's boring, right, or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of complaint about Walt Jr., right? He just eats breakfast, like that's his thing. That kid will sit down and he'll eat eggs and he'll eat waffles and that's his business for the show, right? That's what he's going to do that week.
Unless he's in a bad mood, and then he'll say no to breakfast. Right?
That's right. Yeah, that could be also. But it revolves around, sort of the day-to-day things, whereas, they've tried to give Skylar a bit more complexity, and people don't like it because they tuned in to see Walt, right?
Yep.
And she's just getting in his way. So, like, the whole plot line with Ted Beneke, people weren't interested in, but I think it was, again, I think it added this level of complexity, someone trying to, in some sense, have her own thing, right? She's getting back at Walt, having her own thing outside of the marriage in the way that he had his thing outside of the marriage, trying to have some level of control, in a situation where she felt that she didn't have control. I thought there was a lot going on there, but people you know, for whatever reason, they had either already hated the character, didn't want her to have more action going on, or you know, simply saw her as stepping on Walt's, you know, stepping on the sort of tail of Walt's coat and holding him down.
Yeah. So I read an article maybe a week ago, maybe a bit more, on that was kind of calling out the praise of Breaking Bad as just loving the new thing, and people saying, you know, that's in all these lists of the best TV shows of all time and things like that. And this person was saying, look, Breaking Bad it's pretty well crafted, and it's taken a lot from other successful shows. It's standing on the shoulders, I guess, of a lot of other shows, and it's by no means a classic. And I wonder, I found myself agreeing with a lot of it, and I think that's kind of stuff happens all the time. The new thing gets way overrated compared with older things, but I wonder how it seems one of those shows that has captured people and is doing that weekly thing that used to be popular, where you would say, "Hey, did you see Breaking Bad last night?" Or it was, you know, "Did you see Friends last night?" or something. When shows are at that popularity level, obviously popularity skews critical praise. But I know you're a fan of The Wire, and I wonder how this compares for you, because it doesn't hold a candle for me.
Yeah. I think that it's one of the best things I've seen. I don't think, I think that I feel differently about The Wire than I do about Breaking Bad. I think that in some sense Breaking Bad is a tighter, it's run as a tighter ship than The Wire was. I think that there are some parts of The Wire that feel a little bit kind of flabby to me. There are some parts of The Wire that are the most amazing thing, right? I mean, literally the most amazing thing that I've watched. The first season of The Wire, the third season of The Wire, they were amazing. I could have watched them over and over again. I could have watched them all in one sitting. I just thought they were phenomenal. The fourth season was the one with the kids, right? Schools. That one also was great. 2 and 5, seasons 2 and 5 of The Wire, not my favorite. 2 was kind of a throwaway. I think that nothing is wasted in Breaking Bad, right? It's just it's very clearly a vision from start to finish, where there's a clear purpose to what's going on. There's a clear story that's being driven, and you feel like you want to keep sort of plowing into it and figuring out where it's going to go and what's going to happen, until you've got to the point where I am now, where I can't. It hurts me to watch it, right? Which is why I say I don't think I'll watch it again, right? As much as I've enjoyed it, as great as it was, if I did watch it again, I mean, how do you watch 4.5 seasons and not watch the last half of season 5? And then I don't think you can, but I also don't think that I can watch these episodes again. Like I said, the psychic toll of them has been a lot to take. It's punishing.
Yeah. Well, I think it's if it was a book, it would be a page turner. I think they've got that. They've got this pacing thing down that maybe The Wire wasn't as interested in. I think The Wire was a broader story, right? And I think, there were very few characters in The Wire that were one-dimensional.
Yeah.
And they did really well at an ensemble piece.
Yeah. But it's also the case. It's also the case that the D'Angelo story on The Wire and the Stringer story on The Wire were the best things. Sure, people in the comments, I hope you'll argue with me. Feel free to. But I don't know. I don't think that's controversial. I don't think that the Ziggy storyline of season 2, the what was it? Sabatka, was that their name?
Yeah.
I just don't think that was so compelling. And I understand why, why it was done, but I didn't find it particularly compelling. In fact, I found it really jarring to go from season 1 to season 2. I thought that putting Presbalewski in the classroom was great. I thought that the Carcetti storyline was okay, was interesting. I think he's better on Game of Thrones, but whatever. And I found the last season mostly irritating, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. The comment was talking about this article was, people are saying this is better than The Sopranos and things like that. And there have been some TV shows that were groundbreakers and standards, and this person's argument was that Breaking Bad is not one of those. Breaking Bad.
Those are different shows, right? I mean, the Sopranos was about characters, right? It wasn't about plot, and this show is about plot.
Well, right? And the other thing I wanted to call you on was the idea that it was one vision. There's no way that these people were thinking about 5 seasons when they put the pilot together for Breaking Bad. I mean
I think they were thinking much shorter.
Yeah. You think about 1 season. That's what you hope to have.
I don't know. I feel like I heard this before. I think because I just heard an interview with Vince Gilligan, and maybe I'm mixing this up with something else I heard, but I think that he was thinking 3 seasons if they could get it.
That's pretty broad, that's pretty long range thinking for a TV person.
Yeah, I mean, and he's both a TV and a movie person, right? But no, I think that what I like about this, what I find so compelling about this, is the way that it makes you feel and think, right? And I find that to be quite different from other things on TV. I mean, there's lots of shows about guys who are not so good, right? I mean, Showtime did this forever with Dexter. Which, by the way, I don't know if you ever watched Dexter. It just ended, right? They just had the series finale, and that was a train wreck. It was just, it was an unbelievable train wreck.
Well, it was a train wreck for at least 2 seasons, I think.
Yeah, but the way they ended the show was like, if there were any fans out there anymore, like it was just a giant middle finger to the fans, like take that. But I mean, it was the same thing, right? You should feel uncomfortable rooting for Dexter because he's a serial killer, right? But he only kills people who deserve it. So, how do you feel about him? I mean, I get it, right? And even Mad Men, right? Don Draper is not a good man, in a wide variety of ways. So, like, I understand it. Like, that's all very. It's not like that's brand new, but I think that there's a difference. And an important one, and this is sort of where I wanted to take this around to, Walter White is not just not a good man. He's not an anti-hero. He's a villain, right? He's bad. He's the bad guy. Like, he's the clear bad guy. And what they've done to make a show about in some sense, the creation and evolution of a villain, I think, is really fascinating, right? To have your central character around whom all of the action revolves be a bad person, is really, really different.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's kind of, I mean, that's the best kind of hero stories have a well-crafted villain. That they're not a 2-dimensional villain. It's almost like this would be a great way to set up a hero story. It'd be interesting if someone took the success of this and moved it to another show. That concept of really exploring the villain, or the creation of the villain, really, because at the start he was just a small bad man, but in parallel, we're looking at the hero and the evolution of the hero.
Well, and that, of course, I mean, that is why the Star Wars prequels failed, right? Because ostensibly that was the purpose, right?
Right.
Here you take a young boy, and you show us how he becomes a villain, and it failed. I mean, it's failed spectacularly. There was nothing compelling about it, really, until the very, very end of that last of the films, and even that wasn't compelling because of Anakin Skywalker, but instead because of Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? It didn't work. You need someone who's a better storyteller. You need and you don't need big plot, right? I mean, this isn't big plot about why Walt goes bad. It's about a series of choices that leads you down a road where all of a sudden you're watching people aspirate on their own vomit, and you're running people over with your Aztec. I mean, these were not the choices that he thought he would be making.
Right.
But he also didn't know himself very well. Right? I mean, that's part of what happens here, right? The reason these are not the choices he saw himself making was because he didn't really know who he was. He did not know what his motivations were.
Yeah. As I said, it would have been interesting to have Hank be an equal top billing. I think he's obviously played that role of the opposite, I suppose. It would be really interesting to see two people who are kind of in the same situation and they make different choices on different things, I suppose. That could be a really compelling show, because I think having a good villain, I mean, it's been shown time and time again to be a great difference maker for stories to have a good villain, but Darth Vader, he didn't have any backstory. He could have been so much more in those movies with a backstory. A good example is Darth Maul. I mean, he was zero. I mean, everybody loved him because of how he looked, how he fought, but he was ultimately completely forgettable as a villain. So I think the more story you can put into the villain, the more the hero has to fight against, and the decisions that the hero makes can become more important too.
Yeah. No, and that's another gigantic flaw with the Star Wars films. That, I mean, who's the villain of the prequels?
George Lucas.
Yeah. You said that with such a straight face. Look, the villain is Palpatine, right? But you don't know a single thing about him. So like now you need a set of prequels about him. Like there's never any explanation for why these people are doing the terrible things that they're doing. Why is Darth Vader torturing everybody, right? Like it's because he couldn't find, it's because he had trouble loving? I mean, what? Like, what? He had bad dreams. I think that it's such a failure. And that's what we're getting here. That's very different, right? We're actually watching how someone comes to go down this road. And I think that's really fascinating. That's something that I hadn't seen before, and that I found really, really compelling, and that now you find hard to watch, right?
Yeah.
Because it's earned, right? That like what happens at the end is earned by everything else, and there's nothing earned in like the Star Wars movies, right? In the prequels. There's just nothing earned there. It's just a series of unfortunate events that culminate in a lot of people getting killed and a bunch of sadness, right? But why? Because this little kid, didn't play well with others or whatever, right? Was convinced of something that wasn't true by someone whose motivations are unclear. I mean, that's unearned, right? All of the killing in episode 3 is completely unearned, whereas the killing in Breaking Bad, I mean, there's a price that has to be paid for this villainy, and that's what you get.
Right, and it's why TV shows are the things that are going to be remembered in popular fiction for decades to come. It's not going to be the movies that are coming out now. TV has come into its own as a storytelling device because people are thinking long term. They're not thinking episodic. And I mean, I can't think of many movies that have come out in the last 5 years that are going to be long remembered because of the characters that they produced. It's the TV shows that are doing it, but they've got a huge advantage. They can tell stories over a long period of time.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's where I think Marvel is trying to harness that a little bit with the way that they've brought movies out. But even with some of those, if they try too hard to put too much story in there, that's when they lose. You have to keep it simple, and we'll see where things go. It'll be interesting to see the next Thor movie.
Oh yes, no, I can't wait. I mean, I have the date circled on my calendar. Who can wait? And my anticipation after that first Thor movie, my anticipation levels are through the roof.
Natalie Portman.
Oh yeah, no, believe you me, I know who she is. But no, it's yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, television is really the medium for this kind of compelling storytelling right now, I think. I mean, you have so much space. For a good showrunner has so much space, so much time, and if it's done well, I mean, it's just so compelling. It can be done so well. I think we should wrap up, and I because we could go on forever. But I want to ask you, because again, I'll say this for the third time: you have not seen the first 7 episodes of the last half of the 5th season.
Right.
What do you think is going to happen?
I would assume that Mike and Jesse will team up. I think talking father and son relationship, that's where there's a father and son relationship. I think they'll try to split from Walt. That'll be the general agitation there. I think obviously Hank comes into that somehow. What do I think is going to happen? I would hope that Jesse gets involved with Hank, and that they don't take the Dexter way out and keep Walt alive at the end. Basically.
You are further behind than I thought.
Right.
So, have you seen all of the first half of season 5?
I have, but when you were that. What's the name of the character that came in with the train robbery? I can't remember much of him.
Oh, Todd.
Todd, yeah.
Todd.
I vaguely remember, but I can't remember.
Oh. Oh, Todd.
So I clearly need to watch that part again.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, so I can't tell you anything about what I think is going to happen in the finale this weekend because it would spoil really now 16 episodes for you, I think, not 8. I am now not convinced that you've seen any of season 5.
No, I've definitely seen it. That's the train robberies in season 5, right?
It is indeed, yes.
Yeah.
And you don't remember what happens at the end of the train robbery?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I remember one specific thing. I can't remember the fallout from it, though.
They rob the train.
Right. And then they're seen by someone.
That's right. They are. Right. A young boy. Yes.
Right.
And things involving Todd occur.
Yeah, well, Todd takes care of the boy, right?
Todd's a maniac.
Right.
There's no no two ways around that. Todd is a maniac, and yeah, Todd has Todd has all sorts of unpleasant connections. Todd knows a lot of bad people. Yeah, no, there's a whole lot of bad. So here's the thing. If I'm right about Vince Gilligan's moral universe, there are two ways that this could end, either one quite plausible. In one version, Walt dies, and it's either in a hail of gunfire, or he just dies of cancer, right? And those are two very different ways to die. And the other way is Walt doesn't die, right? And after the 4 most recent episodes, I am leaning toward Walt doesn't die.
And so not dying and not going to prison, I assume.
Right. That's right. And that makes it worse, right? So that's if I'm gambling, if I'm in Vegas, I put money on Walt doesn't die, because that makes me feel the worst. And in truth, I really think that that's what this show is going to be. It's going to have been about taking me on a journey where, in the end, I see all the horrible consequences to the things that I felt for a number of years, and then I get even no relief at the real finale.
Right. When I could certainly see Hank dying, being killed by Walt. Maybe I could certainly see Skylar and Walt Jr. being collateral damage.
I can neither confirm nor deny any of the things that you are saying.
Right. No, I'm just giving you some predictions, as I might even have a marathon weekend of catching up. We'll see.
Are they all on your DVR?
They are, waiting for my wife to get there. So I might be able to get there before. I'll text you if I do, for sure.
Good. If you do, we'll have a Saturday night or Sunday morning conversation.
What time is it on? It's on Sunday at 9, 8.
Oh God, I don't know. Maybe it's 8/7 Central. Maybe it's 9/8 Central. We're in different time zones, so I could tell you anything, and it would be right. The last 2 episodes are 75 minutes each.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the last 2 are longer.
And this is the last one on Sunday.
It is indeed.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Well, on that note, where I can neither confirm nor deny your suspicions, but where I can certainly hope that you and your wife. No, you know what? No. Don't marathon watch these episodes. Don't do it. Don't do it. You can't do it. I don't think it would be good for you.
Understood.
I think you could probably marathon watch the first 3 of the 7, but not the last 4. I think that would hurt it would hurt your soul.
All right.
Thanks, Matt. This has been fun. I look forward to hearing people's thoughts on Walt's villainy, on Skylar as a character, on Hank as the hero sheriff, on Walt Jr. as a sofa, anything that we've discussed today, and certainly, obviously, on George Lucas being the true villain of the Star Wars films. Yeah, tell us what you think about this TV show, TV shows in general, how heroes or villains are being portrayed, and we'll check back in with you next week on the Hero Report.
See you then.
See ya.